Okay, in this video what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate some other behaviors by EIGRP. We're going to show how EIGRP auto-summarizes by default, and one of the things that it does when it does that is it installs summary routes to null-zero interfaces, which can cause problems on the network. So we're going to demonstrate EIGRP's auto-summarization, and then we're going to turn that off and show you the difference. Also, we're going to show you how EIGRP or EIGRP does equal cost load balancing by default. It's capable of doing unequal cost load balancing if it's configured, but by default it does equal cost load balancing. I'm going to talk about that. We're going to look at successor and feasible successors. We're also going to demonstrate some bandwidth based metrics by changing the bandwidth on the links. And in order to do this, we need to expand the network even further. So I grabbed out another generic router. This is the first generic router right here that I dragged out here, and then these are two generic switches that I dragged out right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these up, and the network that we're going to use between these two, let's just do that really quickly. We'll grab a crossover cable since it's router to router. We'll use the first available Ethernet here, and then the first available Ethernet here. Okay, and what we're going to do is this network in between these two routers, we're going to use network 12, which I created. You can see I created some more networks here. We're going to use network 12, which is the 192.168.8.0 network /24. I'm going to configure those interfaces off screen, pause the video, and then come back. Okay, I configured IP addresses on these two interfaces here. This one over here is 192.168.8.1, and this one right here is 192.168.8.2. And so now let's hook up the other router's interfaces to these two switches. So for this one, router to switch, I'm going to use a straight through cable since it's router to switch, and I'll use the next available Ethernet, fast Ethernet 1/0, and I'll go into the first available here, right? And now for this one though, for this connection, there's another Ethernet interface available, but it's actually a fiber optic interface. So for this, I'm going to need to grab a fiber optic cable, this orange one, and I'll hook that into fast Ethernet 4.0. See how the graphic is different? That's for fiber optic. And I'll go over here and put that into the fiber optic one here, which is 4.1. So now I have those hooked up, and what I want to do is I've got this network 8, 9, 10, and 11, and I've created this so we can demonstrate the auto-summarization problems that can happen with EIGRP. So I created 4 subnets. I created a 7.0 subnet /26, and then a 7.64 subnet /26, 7.128, and 7.192. So each one of these subnets has 64 hosts, 62 usable. The network numbers are 0, 64, 128, and 192. And what I'm going to do is I'll use the 128 subnet and the 192 subnet for these two networks. I'll put 128 over here and 192 over here. So this interface will be the first available host, which will be 129, and this one will be 193. And I'll configure those interfaces right now when I pause the video, and then I'll come back really quickly and they should be up. Okay, so I configured these interfaces. This is 129, this is 193. I wrote here the starting address for this 7 network was 7.0/24, and I subnetted into 4 subnets. So we're all set here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Options, Preferences, and I'm actually going to turn off the device labels to make a little more space here on the graphic board. And I'm going to drag network 6 up here, so we know that this is network 5, this is network 4, this is network 6, and then I can put the other networks here. This one over here was network 2, this one here is network 3, and then if we just copy this, copy and paste, this one right here is now network 11, and it has 62 usable hosts, and I'll just copy that. This network 10 with 62 usable hosts, and then in between these two networks, network 12, and that has 254 usable hosts. So that's just to help you map out the network. That's what we have so far. So let's add these three networks to our EIGRP routing processes. First, we'll start with this router. We have to add this network to EIGRP. So open the router. And the wildcard bits for this one is rather easy because it's classful. It's /24 would be 255.255.255.0. So the opposite of that is 0.0.0.255. And I believe that was for the 8 network, for network 12. And sure enough, that's the 8 network. So we just add that to the EIGRP process, right? And I'll copy this if I can. Copy, and we'll add that one to this process. Nope. See if we can paste that in there. And there it is. All right, we've just added that network. But now we have to add the other two networks to this process. So we're going to add the 7.128 network and the 7.192. So 7 up arrow, 128, and now the question is, what will the wildcard bits be? Well, if it's /26, then the normal subnet mask would be 255.255.255.192. So if you were to subtract this out, I believe you would get 0.0.0.63. 255 minus 192 is 63. So on the router, it would be 0.0.0.63, and then we'll just do up arrow and change that to 192. Okay, and so now this router is functioning in the EIGRP, the EIGRP process, and so they're both engaged. Now we can look at how the routers are auto-summarizing and some of the results in our routing tables, and we can examine that.